Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Ayan Sanyal with me. He is the co-founder of Kolkata Chai Company, a chai company with a cafe in the East Village of New York City and an online marketplace. Online, you can buy DIY chai kits, gift boxes, and in person, you can enjoy some hot or cold tea and some food. Ayan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Arnav,
Uh, yeah, thank you.
having me.
So, yeah, of course, thankful to have you on. So for the people that don't know you as well, can you kind of take us back to your beginning? Where you grew up, your family situation, and what type of kid you were.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm the product of two immigrants from Calcutta or Kolkata, India. And so my parents moved here in about '87, and I was born in '92, and grew up right outside of Boston in Massachusetts, and had a very kind of varied childhood with a lot of cultural influences. But most importantly, we would go back to India a lot as a kid. So I was raised with kind of that perspective and understanding of what it is to live in a third world country with less resources, and that kind of contrast compared to like what my friends were doing in America, like eating pizza and playing video games and all that stuff. It was very it was interesting to get that perspective in life really early on. I think that really shaped who I am, and also it really shaped the business that I started later on.
Yeah, I'm curious, not to dive right in, but it's been interesting following you and Ani's journey, and just reflecting on myself as an Indian American. Um, I'm curious, have you always been so passionate about culture? I think it's interesting, for us, when we go to school, it was mostly a white um, environment and an American culture. And so when I was growing up, there were times where I kind of hid my culture and wasn't always proud of it. I'm curious, obviously now, um, you're doing great things in terms of honoring your culture. Have you always had that relationship?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a lot of push and pull. Like there are some days where there's some points in my life where I was very, very proud of it and I wanted everyone to know. And there are some days that I definitely, wanted to hide parts of it, especially to like people outside of my culture who didn't really understand it. And so I think part of growing up as a first generation American has to do with kind of reconciling those two cultures and um, coming to terms with you are both and you are neither, which is a kind of interesting concept because I go back to India these days and everyone's like, "Who's this? Like who's this guy? Like this guy doesn't dress like us. He doesn't look like us. He's like fair skin. Whatever all
Yeah.
these things." And so it's it's complicated for sure. But I think I've always like we always used to listen to Bollywood music, Bengali music. Growing up, like that was always in the thing. I think for me, if like my first passion was music, right? So I really came in trying to be an artist and trying to be a singer and a songwriter and all that stuff. And so when you grow up in sort of that creative environment with creative aspirations, I think it forces you to just be open about stuff, right? And just be really open to all kinds of influences and all kinds of cultures. And I was learning jazz. I was really into bossa nova music. Like I've like really kind of done a conscious job of just like breaking down those barriers in my own head of like what I can gravitate towards, whether it's rock and roll or hip hop or bossa nova or jazz or whatever it is. I like music was my kind of like first entry into all kinds of cultures, and so going through that process and really kind of figuring out that you're both and neither, and making then like if you in your next creative pursuit, or whether it came down to starting this company, this chai company, it was like we want to kind of marry the both of them in the best way possible. So it's like I love American cafes, but you to get the chai you have to go to like a immigrant neighborhood like Jackson Heights to get kind of like the authentic chai. So it's like, why can't we have both? Why can't we have like a very premium experience in a very like hip and high kind of retail environment, and then also marry that with kind of the street food and the authentic drinks that and chai that we grew up with. So it's kind of marrying both of them and reconciling both of them.
Yeah, yeah. You talked a little bit about the music. I'm curious, just given where you are today, was entrepreneurship something you thought about explicitly? Did it come about later in your mindset, or how has entrepreneurship been viewed, as the years have gone on for you?
Yeah, I think as soon as I entered the job market, I realized that I did not like working for other people, and I really wanted to work for myself. And I did work for other people for a very long time to learn skills and build up my abilities or whatever. But I think whenever I was, me and Ani started our marketing agency, which is our first kind of foray into what they call like full-time entrepreneurship. But when that happened, it was like it was always the end goal. It was always the end goal was to own something and run something yourself and have the autonomy and the agency to make decisions. I think whenever I was at a company and I'd be understanding like the organizational structure or how they're growing and what they're doing, I always kind of pick up things about how I think my business should run in the future. And now, I'm at the helm of it, and it's like, wow, I am making all those decisions, and I feel like it's the honestly, like for me, it's the most challenging thing I've ever done. But like it's tested. Like when I was working, I never really felt like I was being used to my full potential. And so when I started entrepreneurship, I think it really helped me tap into that and understand that now I'm being really kind of tested to all my limits, which is a different problem, but a better problem to have.
Yeah. Yep. Um, you talked about it a little bit there, but I guess so, after Brandeis, you worked a couple years in SEO for Havas Media and 2U. I guess you know, if you do you have any advice for people out there that who might be of a similar mindset where, entrepreneurship is something they're thinking about, whether it's 5, 10 years down the line, in terms of, because ultimately you turn that into, Green Room Creative, which was a digital marketing agency, but obviously your ability to do that, um, you know, was possible because you learned the SEO strategy skills and things like that.
Yeah, I think there's two kind of main things for me. It was like, um, then the first kind of rule that you have to have is that you have to know. I'm gonna not curse, so I'm gonna say you have to know how much crap you want to eat. And I think I tell my employees this too now, where it's like there's always going to be a trade-off and balance. If you're trying to do something else and you're trying to build up like your passion project, or you're trying to switch jobs, or you're trying to start your own venture, whatever it may be, whenever you're transitioning, it's always going to be this concept of like, should I keep doing this? Is this worth my time? Versus, is this other thing? Can I get this other thing to be worth more of my time and my effort than what I'm doing right now? And so that battle was always really, really tough. I mean, it used to drive me crazy, to be perfectly honest. When I would, go into work, and I would do hopefully a decent job. Like I would say, like, I would put myself into it, and I would learn a lot at these jobs. I remember my first job at that Havas, the agency. Like they had me just like writing all these articles for SEO, and I was like just like writing a lot every single day. And it was weird because I didn't love it, but then I really got good at doing something kind of random, and those skills still help me today, right? So it's like I can bust out like a 300 400 word article like very quickly, and it's decent, and it's well researched, and I can do that. And that's a skill that I think is really helpful to be a good writer. And because I would have to, I'd have to publish that, and I had to have an editor and this and that. And so it's like once you're kind of forced into certain jobs, like any job can be a learning experience, right? Like I was selling shoes when I was 17 years old, and that was a learning experience for me. I learned how the people were, how the owner was talking about the shoe. I learned out how he was managing me, and I learned about how to talk to someone in a sales environment. So everything can be a learning experience. The question is whether you have enough, whether it's enough saved, or if it's, whether your side hustle or whatever your business that you're doing is taking off, and you have enough to kind of cover your living expenses. All these things is this calculation of basically trade-off. I think it really comes down to that when you're trying to make that jump. And for me, it took a while. It took a long time. There was a time when I was working full time, building my business, having other kind of side gigs, freelance gigs, this and that, to keep doing it. And so that kind of comes to the second point what I was going to make, whereas if you want to go into entrepreneurship, you really have to, I think there's some quote somewhere that I'm pulling from, but it's like you define what success is and then you pay the price for it, right? And so, if that is what success is, right? If you don't have, someone kind of footing your bills and you have to kind of make your dues every month to stay alive and healthy and have a roof over your head, to do that, then you're gonna have to cut down on your social life. Like, you're gonna have to cut down on these other things, free time. Like, you're not gonna be able to control as much of those things if you want to keep working. And so, those sacrifices, both Ani and I definitely made them, and it did pay off. But at sometimes it was like, is this even worth it? Like, I'm not happy right now. Is this worth the long-term thing? So I think it's like, once you set the goals of success, you have to pay the price for it as well. And I think a lot of people, flirting with entrepreneurship will try to do something. Maybe it won't go well, and then they'll be disheartened. They'll be like, okay, back to the 9 to 5. But I think the tenacity that you need to have to kind of follow through it and keep going until you find results, I think is what kind of it determines your success at the end of the day. And so, figuring out figuring out when it's time to jump ship, to make that transition. And then also figuring out, once you do that, are you willing to pay the price for it? Because there is a out of the frying pan into the fire type of mentality to this stuff.
Yeah. So, speaking of which, so, for I guess 3 years you were working, for outside companies, and then 2017, then you and Ani, your brother, decided to start Green Room Creative, digital marketing agency. Can you talk about, as you look back at that experience, um, I guess what you just said, how did you feel comfortable making that jump from corporate to entrepreneurship? And then B, I guess I'd look at the, kind of talk to us about the family aspect too. Obviously you and your brother have a personal relationship, and that becomes totally different once you add the business aspect.
Sure.
So just as you reflect back, any advice you have for people working with family or thinking about working with family?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the whole green room kind of experience was a lot of um, habit changing and relationship changing that me and Ani had to do in order for us to have a successful brotherhood and also have a successful business relationship, because there are two things and they do get intertwined, especially when you're working with family. Like, you bring all your family relationship baggage into the business relationship. That's always not like the most appropriate, right? And so it's like, why are you treating me like a little brother? Like, we've had that issue. Or, why are you behaving like a little brother? Like, we also had that issue, right? And
Yeah.
so that it actually was really, really tough for the first couple of years, figuring out that balance and figuring out how to work with each other. I think there's definitely a lot of compromising that has to happen, and a lot of self-awareness and growth that also needs to happen. I think, when we started, I was definitely a little immature in certain aspects, and it took me a while to kind of adjust to, again, paying that price. So, like, figuring out, okay, like, I really need to prioritize this and put in, bring my 100% A game, or it's not going to be a success. And, like, we don't really have the option for failure, right? So it was very much, everything was on the line all the time. And so working with family, I think, I honestly, like, nowadays I would say, like, get a coach, like, get either a business coach or even, like, consider doing, like, therapy right off the bat if you decide to go into something with family. I think I mean, I haven't had a business coach yet, but we've been in therapy separately, and that's worked like wonders for our relationship in the last year or so. Because you just realize that you have all this, again, like all these patterns and baggage that you bring into your relationship, and so it's really important to just be aware of that. And sometimes a third party or a professional can really, really illuminate a lot of things, and help you kind of make those habitual changes, and also make changes in the way that you communicate with each other, with each other to um, create more like healthy guidelines and communication guidelines. So, we've both shown a lot of growth, and now it's a lot better than it used to be. But like it definitely took a long time, and I think a lot of the green room creative was, besides of like figuring out what the business was, it was a lot of figuring out how to work with each other and how to accept each other for who we are and our different working styles and our strengths and weaknesses, just like you have to do with any other business partner. But with your family, it's even more
Yeah.
I would say like dramatic, because it's like this person that you've known for all your life as well.
Yeah. Um, in terms of the digital marketing agency side, I'm curious if, as you look back on that part of your journey, you have any advice on either building clientele or building a forte. I know culture was definitely a big part of, a lot of the companies you worked with, or, any lessons for anyone out there trying to, create a digital marketing agency or keep it afloat or things of that nature.
Yeah, I think like all consulting, it's about time and value, right? And so it's important to value your own time, and to build things accordingly in a way that actually benefits you, because there's a lot of times where you didn't set something up properly, and it turns out you're doing a lot of work, and you're not able to bill certain hours. And a lot of that time, like starting out, you're gonna have to do that. It's gonna be a little bit uneven. You're gonna be doing a lot of work, a lot of learning to produce results, and it's gonna take more time than you think it is starting out. But then once you get into a flow and you're able to produce results, and you produce client satisfaction, then it's kind of figuring out, okay, well, how can I scale this? How can I, do 10 more of these so I can kind of keep building the business? And that's what we, really have to figure out. I think, yeah, really all comes down to value. So for our business, it was very simple. It was, you paid digital ad dollars. We're managing digital ad dollars and digital strategy, um, whether it's website presence, brand positioning, how you're coming across to kind of your users, who are you targeting, what's your target audience, figuring out all these questions, and then providing the strategy and the consulting towards that, and then producing the results, right? And that's kind of the toughest part when it comes to consulting and agencies, where it's like you really have to produce some kind of return on ad spend or whatever the metrics are, to make it all worth it for the client. So the client is like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
now I put this money in, and I'm getting 10x back from it, and then everyone's happy and it all makes sense. And it doesn't happen always immediately, so you need someone that's patient, that can work with you to get up there, and you need to kind of work with aligned people that have the patience and understand the business and understand that what you're doing on the other hand to grow their business. But at the end of the day, if you're not growing your client's business as a consultant, then you're not really providing value, and you could be kind of let go at any point. So it's very cutthroat in that way, but also I think it's nice in the sense that it sets up a competitive landscape for everyone to kind of bring the goods.
Yeah. So, 2018, I started seeing you travel to India, go to some tea gardens, um, you know, do farmers markets, pop-up shops, all sorts of things. Um, can you kind of talk to us about when did the idea of maybe thinking about starting a chai company came to your head? What was, what happened, or how did you formulate it? And then, why did you decide to actually take action from that thought process?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that were happening sort of. There are things that were happening trend and market wise that we were noticing, and then there are also things just happening internally with me and my passions of what I wanted to pursue. So I had this idea for a while, since like 2015, of yeah, I just got into making chai like by myself, and I was just like, oh, this is so cool. Like my parents really never. It's funny. Everyone always asks, like, is it your grandmother's recipe? But like my mom, like I don't know about your parents, but like my mom doesn't make masala chai like that at home.
Yeah, no.
She's too lazy. She doesn't want to do the spices and this
Yep.
and that, and it's a lot of work, right? She'll just brew a pot of tea, and that's what she has every day.
Yeah, Lipton.
Right, right. But the masala-ness, the masala and the milk and all that stuff, that was like something that we'd go out when we were in Kolkata, we'd go out and get it. And so having that experience a lot, and then being bougie in New York City, like working a tech job, being bougie, being introduced to like for third wave coffee kind of, and understanding that people were kind of caring more about where their roasts were coming from. They were kind of getting into single origin, and all this stuff was hub was happening around coffee. The experiences, the blue bottle, like minimal, amazing kind of like Japanese woodwork and all this stuff that was happening. And I love coffee shops. I love coffee shops. It's funny. I was like looking through my old writing, and I like found this article like from 2015 about me just like writing about like Boston coffee shops and like things that I love about like coffee shops. Like I love to hang out in coffee shops and meet people there. It's been always part of my life. And then it was just like this idea of like why is chai like just relegated to the bottom of these menus? It's like some syrupy thing. It tastes like trash, right? It's like cinnamony and like sweet, and it doesn't have any kind of the tasting notes that traditional masala chai has. And kind of just coming to this realization that okay, like there are people like me out here that are probably kind of upset about this,
Yeah.
and also like there's a need for this kind of product. And so realizing that there's a passion for it, but then there was also kind of like a market and a business need. But then we started out like food and beverage. We have no experience. What are we gonna do? And, I remember going to the Jersey like business town hall or business department or something like that, and getting a permission slip and figuring out how to get the permit for the market and this and that. So started out really small, and really kind of tested out like, will people even enjoy this? Do people even care? And right from the jump, it was like a solid yes of people really loving the product and getting behind it. And from there, it was just kind of following the next step and the next step. And before you know it, we're opening a cafe in New York City.
I'm curious, was there any, when you were telling, friends or family this business idea, was there anybody pushing you not to do it? Or was there ever a point where you were like, this is a big risk and I might not go forward with it? Or were you always pretty confident in wanting to try?
I think, me and Ani were already entrepreneurs at that level. So we were accustomed to high risk. And then in terms of my parents, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't really listened to what they said since the jump. Like I wanted to like play guitar and be like a rock star when I was like 13, right? And so both me and Ani kind of worn them down pretty quickly from an early age. And so I think they've forced themselves to be a little bit more open about it. But at the same time, I do have to give them credit for being open more than other people that I know, right? I think that they, could have violently shut things down when we were very young, and that would have kind of like kept us on more straight and narrow path. But the fact that they were like actually kind of curious about it and allowed us to pursue our curiosity, I think that ultimately led to us being more kind of what's the worst of risk, opposite of risk averse, just having a higher appetite for risk. And then, yeah, I remember like Ani was kind of egging me on, to be perfectly honest. He was like,
Yep.
do it. You're not going to do it. Like you're just talking about it. You're not going to actually do it. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, I'm actually going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I did it. And then it was like, oh shoot. And then Ani was also like sitting from the sidelines being like, oh, this is kind of crazy. And obviously we when we were launching the brand, like it was a collaborative effort, because Ani comes with, a lot of amazing kind of brand experience. And he's really, really like, he took it to the whole other level, what I was able to do. And so, yeah, I think there's always going to be setbacks, but if you start small and you test the market and you test the waters, and you see if you can have traction, I think you can kind of plan things out a little bit better. So there's a lot of planning, and then there's a lot of jumping, like
Yeah.
jumping, got to make the leap at some point, but then there's also a lot of planning behind it.
Throughout the journey, I'm sure, like, at least listening to you, right? If you look at the facts from the outside, right? No food and beverage experience, no tea experience, all this thing. Like, did you ever deal with imposter syndrome? And like, if so, how did you kind of combat or work through that and
Yeah.
kind of just, believe and continue to make strides?
For me, yeah, I did definitely deal with imposter syndrome. I still do in some aspects. I think there's a couple of thoughts here. I think first of all, we live in a world that's it's really easy to be an imposter. It's really easy to get a bunch of people on social media to think that you're hot and think that you're real and think that you could do something. Um, Even a lot of like the really like and they're very talented in their own right of like the food bloggers and people that have like really made themselves very popular. Like they wouldn't be able to last a day in the kitchen. So it's like
Mhm.
there's different levels of experience and different levels of confidence that you have to have. And I think my only my only like strategy against imposter syndrome was just to know my stuff, and just to know everything and become a master of my own craft in my own right. And so like I never went to chef school, I never went to culinary school and all that stuff. And like we have to do food because people wanted food with their chai, and so like how do you figure this out with no experience? Well, you're in New York City. It's one of the best food cities in the world. So you look around, you ask for help, you go, you eat a lot, you taste a lot, and then you kind of translate it and figuring it out on your own of how you're going to make this work in a commercial setting. And so a lot of that stuff was just autodidactic and just learning by myself. And like I would literally go like there's like a very popular breakfast spot down the street from the cafe. So I would go there and I would like look through the windows and see what the prep cooks were doing, right?
Mhm.
And like see how the line cooks were cooking eggs and seeing how like and that's how I picked up stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, we can do it that way. Or oh, okay, we can, the butter has to not burn with the egg and all these little things that you learn. And so that was the only way that I got past imposter syndrome. And now, um, it's some people come to me, some of our investors or some people will be like, who does your food development? Like, because a lot of these restaurateurs, they'll have one who's a restaurateur, one who's a chef, one who's having food development. It's like, no, it's all me. Like,
Yeah.
and so to be into that position of having not a lot of resources, you really have to force yourself to know everything. And so um, knowledge is not like knowledge is not gatekeeping anymore, right? Knowledge is everywhere. Knowledge is on YouTube. Like I would also watch a lot of streetwala like videos on YouTube because
Mhm.
again, those are the masters that are doing it with for years, with no business right on the street, like just doing it, but they're still making something that's really tasty. And so you can learn a lot just by looking and watching and doing your own research, and that's all for free. And so once you go through your own kind of um, once you go through your own system and you gotta get your ass kicked a little bit, then that imposter syndrome goes away because you know that you've earned the stripes to sort of be there.
Yeah.
But I still have it. I still have it. A lot of
Yeah.
people call me
Yeah.
like chef, and I'm like, I'm not a chef. So it's like I still have it in certain aspects.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think we all deal with it throughout our life.
And then
You
the goal
know,
is not to listen to it too much. Not let it make it like don't let it debilitate you. Again, and if you're like me, then if knowledge is your way out of imposter syndrome, then just focus on that. Focus on knowledge and experience, because that'll make you feel better about it.
yeah. So September of 2019, the cafe comes together. Um, Obviously, that's how everyone else looks at it. There's a lot more details that go into it from your end. I guess, as you look back at that process, um, I know there's permitting, architectural plans, there's the branding of, logo design and things like that. Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of that process that you'd like to talk about?
I don't actually remember too much of those first couple months in business, because I was just it was like full adrenaline, and I was just working all the time. And so it was literally just figuring out how to open the next day. And we had people like lining, like the first month, we had people lining up at our doors for opening. And it's like, we don't know anything. It's the first time figuring out this stuff out. And so we had like so many issues, just running out of supplies all the time. And yeah, just getting to the next day and making sure that, you know, the product is good, and people are having a good experience and all that stuff. I think we got we did a lot of things right, but we also got lucky in certain aspects, because you know food businesses have a failure rate of like 80 or 90%, right? And so it's like, um, especially in New York City where everyone kind of goes out of business. It's The odds were stacked against us, but we had good problems of just, you know, keeping keeping kind of like, we didn't have to worry about people coming in for a long time, and so that was good. But it was a different problem of just worrying about how to just keep things going.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you know, so much of the brand is tied to your culture. Um, you know, I was looking at some of the videos on your YouTube channel, and you guys talk about, you know, your mom says to, you know, some onlooker, like, I'm proud of them, Kubalo Chile. You talk about, you know, your grandfather reading about you and Ani in the newspaper. Have you been able to reflect on um, that aspect, you know, the emotional aspect of, you know, even I think about, you know, there are obviously brown parents or any parents bringing in their kids, you know, to your cafe, and how, you know, we didn't have that, and you guys are creating that space, you know.
Yeah.
Do you think about, are you able to reflect on that?
Yeah, I think it is super. Yeah, I think it's super cool. Like, I would, if I didn't start KCC, I would love KCC. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that it's been a real blessing to be able to create that space for people, and be able to tell our stories in a way that, um, that validates other people's stories, right? And so, yeah, in terms of my parents, I think, like, you know, I always tell people like the shop and the concept is really a dedication to them, right? Because it's like, without their, you know, if my mom wasn't homesick, like, we wouldn't go back to Calcutta all the time, and we wouldn't have that experience as young kids. And I think, you know, I know a lot of people that grew up with me that didn't have that view of India as well. Like, they didn't really care too much about it, and they were like, you know, they were kind of, um, they couldn't, you know, maybe even see the beauty in it, right? And I think so, like, having that experience as a young age and being able to, do that was all because of my parents. And so, I think it's really cool that it exists, and I think that it is, again, like, super blessing to be able to, create those experiences for other people, because it's kind of like creating something that you wish existed. And so, you know, I would love to go to KCC if it wasn't my idea.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit. So 6 months in, a pandemic hits. Um, I'm curious, you know, as you look back on that time period in your life, you know, you guys, you know, created DIY chai kits, you created a delivery infrastructure. I guess maybe just talk about, you know, how you deal with pressure and stress, and how you guys continue, you know, as you said, 80 to 90% fail. Um, how have you guys continued to, you know, perform so well in the midst of great pressure?
Yeah, I think so. You know, contrary to all, I mean, look, there was a lot of perseverance and a lot of strength that both of us had to exhibit, um, both mentally and just also just physical toil wise, to keep the business alive during that time and keep things moving forward.
I think, again, it came at a cost, right? It came at a cost. It came at a mental health cost. It came at a actual business cost. And so there was definitely two sides of that period. Um, for us, I mean, it's funny because, like, I don't know, we can diagnose it however you want. I don't want to call it PTSD because I don't think it's that serious, but there is this like survival mode, that I've been in for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm still working myself out of that. Like today was the day that I didn't have to go into the cafe, and I was like, I have a team now that I trust that is gonna, make sure that things are running well, and I'm not worried about it. But like, if you're anxious about something every single day and you don't have always the best tools to be able to compartmentalize or to be able to let go of certain things, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Right. And so for a lot of the time, like I was driving myself crazy. And I still am. Debatable. It's a process. Right. And so that survival mode and that kind of kicking out of that and thinking, giving yourself the ability to think bigger than just like the next day or just making that month's rent or whatever it is. I think that's been a process for us to figure out. And to just get out of that survival mode. I think that's what I'm trying to do this summer is just like, obviously COVID's like still here. So it's not like, it's not really going away, but like living with it. Right. And living with it in a healthy way, like making sure that I take care of myself and seeing my family and doing all these things that are still important to me. Because for a long time, it was just sacrifice everything for the business. And, that's what it took. But that's not necessarily the most healthy balance. And so now I'm trying to kind of reprogram myself to be able to care very much about the business, but not letting it destroy me, so to speak.
Yeah. You guys recently raised $1 million. Can you talk about, maybe any lessons from the fundraising, and then also talk about, now what is the vision, using that money as, what's the expansion plan, or what can people look forward to seeing from KCC?
Yeah, for sure. I think, thankfully, Ani did most of the legwork for completing that raise, and I'm so grateful. And I've learned a lot through him about sort of how that works. I think raising money has taught me a lot about like the capital markets, and I didn't know too much about sort of how people made investments, and like that wasn't really something that I had any kind of exposure to. And so learning how people make investments and how much of a more personal and emotional decision it is rather than sort of this like calculated P&L decision, right? Like if you're Bengali, like my dad's a math nerd, right? And so everything was always about numbers, right? Numbers. But when you get into this kind of like early round of investing, people are kind of like, yeah, okay, the numbers are there, but it's also about the idea. It's about the founders. It's about the vision. It's about the emotional kind of awareness you can bring to your company. And so that was really interesting to learn that and kind of, again, just like deprogram and flip that gear of being like, oh, wait, so it's not just about the hard numbers. It's actually about other things. So that was one big takeaway from the raise. And the next part is, obviously very exciting. I think we finally in a growth mode, and we're able to kind of this entire year, we've just been operationalizing, building out our team, finding good people, and really taking this to the next level and becoming sort of a national entity. And I think, we want KCC to be a household name. And so whether it's, cafes across the country or whether it's, cafes in all the major cities in the United States, plus a very robust e-commerce business and a food service business, supplying other cafes with our product. I think there's a lot of stuff that we are gearing up to do. So it's very exciting right now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's, I guess as we're getting close to time, obviously we've talked about a lot, but, is there anything in terms of, the School of Ayan, like that, you'd like to pass on to people about life or business or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I'm not much of an advice giver. I'm more of an advice reader. Like I love reading different. Like I just have this book right out here actually that I was reading. I found this in some like random dollar store, and I actually read through some of it. And I was like, wow, it looks really corny, but it's actually
Yeah.
pretty good. And it's by
Yeah.
like a very like well known. They're all like PhDs and MDs, and just like figuring out how to manage your mind. Like that's super important, right? Managing your emotional state, whether you're at work or whether you're with your significant other or whether you're with your family or your parents or whatever it is. I think like that's a skill that I'm still learning. I think that a lot of these things, again, like I was again taught very that much that like life is like a numbers game, but I think more and more as I get older, it's more of a emotional management game, right? And so being an entrepreneur, everything goes wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Things get delayed, things don't happen, deals fall through, et cetera, et cetera. And so having the ability to uh, not react to that emotionally, right? A lot of things that I used to do and kind of still do in some certain cases is just reacting emotionally to something that happens, right? And really letting it ruin my day or whatever it is. But the more you kind of get in tune with your feelings and how your mind works, et cetera, you can kind of develop resistance to those emotional, like those like first kind of reactions, and then you can also develop yourself to think through things in a cooler mind, and also be able to not let things affect you as much, right? And so building that resilience, again, it's a skill, and so it doesn't happen immediately, but that's what I've been working on like personally as an entrepreneur, is like building those skills and helping myself when it comes to managing other people, when it comes to working with my my co-partner, or even just dealing with things in the business and things in the game. So um, yeah, it's always like if you can manage your mind, your attitude, it's always in the mind game, because for the next year we don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And by now we should know not to know, right? Like by now we know that we don't know what's going to happen. But
Yep.
if you can build healthy habits and start with yourself and control your own mind, then you can kind of everything else becomes possible. And so that's something that I would state. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on Oyana, I just want to thank you so much for being on. If people want to support KCC, what's the best way for them to do that?
Anyway, if you're in the New York City area, you can come by the cafe at 199 East 3rd Street. And if you're not, you can definitely visit us online and get some chai and see how chai can affect your life and give yourself a much better source of caffeine and better immunity too.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to acknowledge you. Like I said, I've been following you guys from afar for a while, and it's just amazing to kind of see what you guys have accomplished in terms of doing entrepreneurship, intertwining it with culture, and changing the game. I know it's a lot tougher in the day to day than just summarizing it like that, but I mean, just for like I said before, for kids growing up to have this as an option, something that we didn't have as an option, and for people to learn, you know, that chai tea latte is the wrong phrase. Like, tea, chai means tea, so it shouldn't be tea latte, and things like that. These conversations and taking control of representation, all of that's really great. And best of luck going forward.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, Arnav.
Yeah, thank you.